Well, I'm Kaylin. If anyone hasn't maybe seen me before in any of the Curve sessions, I joined the team at Third Sector Lab a couple months ago. I work across comms and lead on the Curve at the moment. So the Curve is a series of workshops and programs, online training that's freely accessible to anyone in the third sector. We also do record all of the sessions and we upload them to our YouTube channel. So this one will go up there shortly after. And if you enjoy, maybe have a look, there might be other topics that you might find useful on there as well. I will also in a minute pop in a link to our training page on our website where you can see a list of upcoming sessions that we've got as well. I think everyone's actually got their names as their Zoom handle. Sometimes I get everyone's names as all like the business or random things, so that's good. Usually I have to tell people, let's change our names so we can talk to one another. I'm also going to pop in some links to the Third Sector Lab website and to our Digital Trustees program as well, which is if you feel like your board is maybe behind on digital and you need kind of someone advocating for digital transformation in there, it's a really great tool to kind of matchmake tech experts and get them on your board, really championing that change. So I'm just going to hand over to Laurance now, who will be taking us through today's session. Excited to have you, and I'll be popping in the slide deck as well as the handouts and other pieces that Laurance has got for us into the chat box so everyone has access to that.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it, and appreciate you all for joining us for the session. I know getting 90 minutes out of your day to come in and get some training can sometimes be difficult. So really appreciate you taking the time to come in and learn some things today and hopefully get some good stuff to take away with you. Today is about cybersecurity. It's about incident response, and it's not about protecting IT. It's about business resilience, right? Because that is what we deal with on a day-to-day basis. If something bad happens, it does have an impact on your IT and your network and your infrastructure, of course, but the real impact is on your mission and making sure that you're able to continue helping the people that you are all helping. So once again, thank you very much for coming in to do that. A little bit about me, why you should listen to what I have to say. I've got 20 plus years in incident response and digital forensics / cybersecurity. I led the global IBM X-Force team. I recently worked at FTI Consulting. I have just started in the summer. I started CIC to help charities with this type of situation, right? And I'll get into a little bit of that as I go through some of the statistics and why I did that. But it's a very underrepresented industry, just like underrepresented for most things, obviously, but you know, in cybersecurity, there's a lot of gaps in there, and you are targeted organizations. So I felt like it was a good opportunity for me to come in and try to help folks. And if you want more information, my website's there. If you want to speak to me, my LinkedIn's profile's there. You're very welcome. Within the handouts, I'll send some further information that you'll get. So feel free to reach out if you want to talk about anything cyber related. For charities, talking and having conversations is 100% free. And the business model is that if I help you to do anything, that's also going to be free for you. So it's a good resource to have available to you. This is what we're going to cover today. We're going to understand what the threats are to you as a charity, to everybody really, but you know, charities specifically have some key threats that they're facing. I'm going to go through some of those. I'm going to walk through some scenarios, get you thinking about what you would be doing if you receive some of this information, if you receive the calls, if you receive these emails, things like that. Thinking about, is your charity set up to respond to those types of things? We're going to go through some practical protection strategies, give you some tips and advice on things that you can do now. We're going to go through what an incident response looks like. And I'm going to share as one of the takeaways a template with some of these strategies, but also a templated incident response plan that you can take away and start filling in yourself, just so that you have something if something bad happens. And you'll hear me repeat this probably several times throughout the presentation, but having something in writing when all the stress and everything is going on that you can refer to is an amazing thing for you to be able to do, because you're not thinking straight when you've just been hit with something big and you're thinking, oh, our charity's going to go bust, or, you know, everything's going crazy. You don't know who to call, where to call. And if you have all that written down, it makes things a lot easier for you. And we should have time for some questions and discussions at the end as well. So this is what we're looking at. And actually this most of this stuff comes from the NCSC questionnaire that was sent out to charities, and then also obviously some statistics from cybersecurity. But when this report came out a couple years ago, and I saw the number of charities that were, you know, that had incident response plans, that tested those plans, that had any kind of preparedness, that is when I started thinking about how can I help charities get better at this kind of stuff, make a real impact in society. I did some of this pro bono for previous organizations, and you know, we did some good and we helped some charities, but there wasn't enough focus. So that's why I decided to open up my own business to be able to do that. And if you think 30% of charities were hit by attacks in the UK last year, that's 61,000 charities. You know, that's a lot of incidents, a lot of, and you know, most of them didn't have any help. You know, maybe some of the bigger ones, they had some help and they had people to come in and respond. But you know, most charities that are sitting in the micro and mini size, right? Like they're not going to have all this stuff together, and they're not going to be thinking about that. So that's why we're here doing this today. And you think 22% have plans, right? And in the corporate sector, that number is probably 65-70% of organizations have some sort of plan in place to know what they're going to do when an incident happens. And only 35% of charities have a policy. Now, a policy is a higher level thing. It goes, you know, policy, plan, and playbooks. If you want to get into playbooks, that's like details of what you do specifically for each type of incident. That's, you know, something that you should be thinking about, but depending on your systems and everything else, right? I don't want to get into technical details, but if you have a big network and a lot of systems, you definitely want to have some sort of playbook to describe what you do for each one of those. I spent a lot of time talking to corporates about why they're targeted. You know, in 5-10 years ago, there was a thought process that if they were only a certain size, they wouldn't be a target. And now that's, you know, for me, that's shifted into charities. A lot of charities don't think that they would be a target because they don't have a lot of money. They don't have big systems. They don't have a lot of vulnerabilities. But I can tell you, there are threat actors out there that will happily target you for £1,000. They'll happily target you for £5,000, right? And they'll target 600 of you or 6,000 of you, and that money starts to add up. Yes, you may not get targeted by the state-sponsored advanced technology threat actors, but you're a good target for people that are learning, right? So, and even some of the biggest breaches that you've seen were done by teenagers, right? You'll see that in the news recently. The teenagers have been recently arrested in the UK, and that's not a new thing. That's been going on for several years. And what I'm trying to address in this presentation is the preparedness gap. Being prepared for an incident is the #1 way of making sure that the impact of that incident is reduced significantly. And that's at all levels of companies, charities, organizations, and that's globally, right? If you have a plan, if you've practiced that plan, if you've trained your employees, even if you get hit because, you know, even the best cybersecurity maturity in the world won't stop everything. So being prepared, making sure that your business is resilient, you have backups if you have a big enough organization where that's a requirement. Things like that make it a lot easier when you get attacked. But you see these numbers, right? Only 21% have regular security training for their staff. Only 14% of staff are going through phishing exercises. And I can tell you, and we're going to go through some of this, right? But phishing is the number one way that threat actors get into the organization. Social engineering is easy. It's, repeatable. If you get good at it, people are able to get in, because we're at our core as humans, we want to believe people. We want to trust them. We think everybody is out to do good, and we hope that is the case. But unfortunately, in this situation, I see a lot of, well, actually, the vast majority of the incidents that I responded to, once you investigate, you identify that the initial entry point was phishing. And there are organizations out there that's what they do all day long. They phish people, they get credentials, and they sell them to other threat groups. And then those threat groups use the credentials to come into your environment and wreak havoc. So they're experts at it. You used to get really bad emails, really badly worded. That's changed, right? AI has helped with that. Practice has helped with that. They can repeat, doing the same thing. And only 9% review immediate supplier risks, right? And supply chain is a massive risk in cybersecurity. It's one, we have cyber experts. That's their only job, is to go out and assess the supply chain risk. Now, it wasn't that's a new role. Hasn't been around for a long time. And then only 34% have cyber insurance coverage. That is something that, is obviously it's up to the organization whether they have insurance or not. But I'd like to see that number go up, because they can help. A lot of cyber insurance companies now offer services similar to what I offer, right? They help train your company. They do a lot of different things for preparedness. So that's changing, it's advancing, and it's getting better. So if you don't have it, it's worth looking into. And then you have regulatory requirements, or if not requirements, you have strongly suggested from some of the regulators, right? GDPR and data protection is a big one. If you operate outside of the UK and you go into Europe, there's lots of other ones that get applied to that as well. But you have the UK Data Protection Act. You've got lots of different regulations that are going to be in here. And in my handout, I've listed out some of those, and in this presentation, I've put in some resources around where you can find additional information. There's also a Charity Commission expectation, right? And I haven't seen a lot of rulings around that, but I can imagine if you get breached a few times, there's going to be some issues about you staying a charity, right? And then Cyber Essentials is a great resource for you. Whether you get certified or not, there's lots of information there for you to be able to go and review what their recommendations are. I would recommend getting certified for everybody, but I understand that, not every charity is going to have the resources to be able to do that. But if you want to sign off and make sure that you have some good maturity in place, Cyber Essentials is a very good place to start. If you're a big charity and you have a big network, you might want to go above that and get some assessors in and do all sorts of things. But for most of us, Cyber Essentials is a really good place to look. The ICO also offers guidance for charities, and I would recommend that you go through and look at some of that stuff when you have time. So social engineering, I touched on this already, and I'm going to touch on it a few more times, right? Social engineering is not new. It's been around for thousands of years. People, were able to use your fear, your trust, your curiosity, to get you to do things that they want you to do, right? And there's various different types of social engineering, and there's lots of different types for social engineering, or different names for social engineering when using technology. But these ones aren't even technology, right? These are human. You have pretexting. I come to you, I tell you a story, get your trust, and I ask you to do something for me. Some of these are very quick. One of the great ones is, making you feel empowered, giving you, it's just between me and you, and I need your help, and I need you to do it now, right? Yeah. Or we see all the time, authoritative figures calling you. If you're new, or you're you're in your job and you're thinking, oh, my CEO just called me, right? And he's putting me in the know, and he wants me to send him a check, but he doesn't want me to tell anybody else, right? It makes you feel like you're part of it. So lots of people do it. It happens all the time. It's not the Nigerian prince scam, but that is, what we've seen in the industry, right? That's where it kind of started in technology, sending an email saying, hey, if you send me 500 pounds, I'll send you 10,000 in a week, right? That stuff happens every day. It's better than the emails that you used to see from the Nigerian scan, but it's still the same tactic, right? There's baiting. That's giving you something that you want. I've seen many, many, many examples of this. I've seen IT people get caught in because they were promised a free game if they clicked on a link, right? I've seen really security focused people, they think they're getting something for free, so it makes them do it. One of the best ones is sending out a spreadsheet saying updated pay slips for everybody. Your curiosity is crazy when you see that. You say, oh, I want to know what everybody makes in the organization. I'm going to click on this Excel spreadsheet, and then you're hooked in, right? One of the good ones that we used to see all the time, it's not as prevalent as it used to be, is putting a USB stick in a parking lot, because people's curiosity, you think, oh, I wonder what's on here, go and stick it in your computer. It sets off a program, and then they have a backdoor into your system. It's just, the goal is to lure you in and trap you. Quid pro quo. These are ones, I'll give you money, you do this, you're getting something out of the situation, or something that you need, we'll give you something free. You give me some information that you don't think is going to be harmful. Hey, can you give me your CEO's or your CFO's email address? I just want to use it to send him something, right? And you think, oh, okay, that's probably going to be, it's probably not going to lead to anything dangerous, and you're going to give me this free gift certificate or whatever it is. So you do it, right? It's not there. It's bad. You see a big one now, a lot of times, people calling from the Microsoft help desk, right? You have a problem on your computer. I'm going to give you this software that's going to fix it. I'll remote in, change everything. I'll make sure that doesn't cost you loads of money. You don't lose all your data. That's big, right? Tailgating, piggybacking. You can imagine, based on the name, what that is, right? It's giving physical access to something. When I worked at IBM, we used to do in-person social engineerings, and we used to walk around. We used to have a fake badge, and we could get into server rooms, right? Just following people behind, just looking like you know where you're going, and you belong there. That's a very easy way of getting in. You could attach something to a server. You'd have complete and total access to everything. These are the different cyber attacks that use social engineering. And there's a lot of subs of these too. Like, everybody likes to name an attack and say that I came up with this term. But the biggest one for me is phishing. We've talked about that. I don't need to go through there. Spear phishing is more personalized. It goes into a specific person. You see these a lot with CFOs. CEOs can get them too, but it's more direct for somebody who has control, right? So that they get them to do something. It can be office administrators because they know that they're the ones who are sending out invoices. And whaling is going for the bigger senior executives. Big business email compromise, that is the number one email-based attack that we see in the industry right now. There are two attacks that if you ask anybody in cybersecurity what's been happening for the past 5 years, 10 years, it's business email compromise and ransomware. When, just a little tidbit, when the Russian-Ukrainian war kicked off, there was a big drop in ransomware. You can make of that as you will, but there was a big increase in business email compromise at that time, right? Because that was an easier thing to do. Get somebody phished in, get them to send you money very, very quickly. Some of these, they combine tactics as well. Invoice fraud is a big one for business email compromise. They send you an invoice and they need you to pay it straight away. If you're not paying attention, you might think, oh, okay, that's Adobe or Microsoft or whatever. I'll just pay that. We must have screwed up somewhere. Another thing that they do with that is they will find one of your suppliers and they'll send you a fake invoice with new bank details on it. So you're thinking that you're paying for your supplier, but actually what you're doing is you're paying a threat actor. That's a big scenario that happens quite often. CEO fraud, and this is getting even more difficult because of AI. Somebody will call you and say, hey, I'm the CEO. I need you to send me this amount of money. Straight away, you're in the know. You're the only person that knows about this. We're buying. I mean, for the big companies, it can be stuff as much as, $1 million, £1 million, saying, hey, we're buying an organization. I need to put down £1 million right now. I need you to wire it to this bank account. It's not on the market yet, so nobody's allowed to know about it. I've seen that hundreds of times in investigations. Phishing, that's voice phishing. These are really great terms, right? They just squish the words together. They call you, or they pretend to be a bank or IT support or anything that they can think of, right? So they want you to provide them with sensitive information or provide them with money or any number of things, because some of these things will be step by step. They'll call one person with a phishing, they'll phish one other person in the organization, they'll smish somebody else, which is essentially the same as phishing, but just via text or SMS or WhatsApp or whatever communication apps you use. Tech support, I kind of talked about that previously. They're telling you, hey, your computer's messed up. This can happen inside of an organization as well as outside of an organization. It can say, hey, we're coming. I've seen tech support scams where they called the individual, said, hey, we're coming to your desk in half an hour. We need to do some updates on it. Somebody has come in, got into the organization, loaded stuff onto the person's computer, and then they had full access to everything that was going on in there, right? And then just impersonating calls. We see this a lot for individuals. We see it a lot. We do see it sometimes in organizations. Individuals get targeted more around the banking, phishing kind of things, right? Where they get them to transfer their full amount, all of their savings into a new secure account because their old account got compromised. Like I mentioned, these attacks don't happen in isolation. They use them all together, and they will use all the social engineering attacks with technology attacks as well. So it's not just thinking about, well, if I can train everybody on phishing, we're going to be good. That is a very good place to start, and if that's the only thing you train people on, I would recommend you do it. But there's lots of other things to be aware of and lots of other techniques that threat actors will use against you. These are the more in-depth technical types of attacks. Like I said, I went through some of these already. The physical in-person attacks, you do have to be aware of that. If you don't recognize somebody in your organization, if you don't recognize somebody in your office, I know some of you, your office may be one or two people, so it would be hard not to recognize that person. But if you are in a slightly bigger organization and you see somebody walking around with a clipboard, ask them who they are, right? Find out why they're there, what they're doing. The other thing that I didn't touch on previously is dumpster diving. In security and investigations, we used to do that to find out information around organizations. Threat actors do it. Bad guys out there will look at your information. So be careful what you're throwing away. That includes IT equipment. We used to see it all the time. People would be selling their laptops on eBay, and then they'd recover all the data because they thought if you format the drive, all the data is deleted. That isn't the case, right? You need to go through real data deletion to get rid of that stuff. And if you're selling it and you're under GDPR and the data is on there, you have issues. I, highly recommend you encrypt your drives, and only you will be able to access it no matter what, right? There's lots of different digital and online attacks. You can go to websites that are fake websites. They tell you to download something that you think you need. You download it. It's there. Some things can download automatically, right? You don't even know it's downloading in the background. So you have to be careful around which sites you're going to. Obviously, making sure it's HTTPS, right? So that it's got the security on the end of it makes a big difference in a lot of this stuff. But it's not just it only requires one person in an organization to start the chain, right? So everybody's got to be aware that what they're using their computers for, they need to be secure. And I know with a lot of charities, you have bring your own devices. You don't even own the computers that they're using. They're helping you. You think all of our stuff is in Office 365 or Google or whatever, however you store your data. But if they're using their computer for other things outside of work, and they do it there, that can cause you problems because then they can get access to the stuff there. You see lots of social media manipulation. We all see it on LinkedIn. If you're on LinkedIn, you get requests from people that just look weird, or you think you know them. I've fallen victim to it myself, of connecting with people, but not, anything outside of that. And then realizing that it was a fake profile, right? So, if people are connecting with you and it seems weird, then think about whether you think that should be there, right? You have fake software updates, you have malicious downloads, you have supply chain software updates that get compromised. We see that massively. I suspect most of those on the call probably won't have that issue. You're not running big networks. Maybe you are. If you are, then that's something to think about. Make sure that you know where that's coming from. Make sure that you're paying attention to what vulnerabilities are out there. And then there's the advanced techniques. I talked about AI already. You can see videos. I've seen video calls set up where the CEO is on the call or on Zoom and he's talking to the person and he's saying, hey, you need to go and do this, or I want you to go and do that. If it seems weird, even if it's that, right, make sure that you're asking those questions. Make sure you're calling them outside of whatever technology you're using. I've responded to incidents where the threat actors were on Office 365, so they were using Microsoft Chat, and they were calling each other. They were calling the people via Microsoft, right? So you want to make sure that you're using a secondary contact to be able to go out and verify that this person is actually asking you to do what the video is saying or whatever is saying, right? And your organization should be very clear that it's okay to question the CEO if you don't think it makes sense, and going and doing a secondary check on that, right? Because otherwise you will end up doing something, sending money to somebody, sending credentials to somebody that's going to cause you problems in the future. And the last line there is trust your gut, right? That's the first instinct, right? If something seems off, If somebody's offering you something so good for something so little, yes, it sounds amazing. And, as a charity, we're charitable. We give people stuff for free all the time, right? So you're thinking maybe somebody's doing it back to us, but just be thinking, is this too good to be true? And most of the time, when you think it's too good to be true, it is too good to be true. And they're trying to get something else. They're trying to manipulate in some other way. So I've talked a lot about phishing. I won't go through too much of this slide because I think I've covered most of it. But the next slide is just a scenario based on phishing. We're going to run through 3 different scenarios. Like I said previously, a lot of these will be combined scenarios. But I want you to, as I'm running through the scenario, I just want you to think, what would you do? How would you respond? And these are very quick scenarios. Really, if you're going through training, you want to do this for a couple of hours, go through a full scenario to get yourself thinking about what you have in place to protect yourself from these types of things. Have you trained your people on those types of things? But if you receive a suspicious email, it looks like somebody who you trust, maybe it's your bank, a donor, whoever, right? It often uses logos, actually almost always uses logos. It almost always will come from either a reputable website or something that looks like it's reputable. It'll have a 0 instead of an O in a name, right? Or it'll have an L instead of an I, something that puts you off. But also, you should be aware that it's possible that it's from a real organization, because that organization may have been that account at that organization may have been compromised, right? So you have to be thinking again, what does it seem to be too good to be true? But they call up and they say, or they email you and they say, hey, I need some urgent attention about this problem. I need you to help me. You're the only one who can help me. It's generally going to be something they're going to focus it on urgency, because that gets your heart rate going. So you start to not think as straight as you normally would. It's going to be like, hey, I need this money transferred in half an hour, or I need this information in 10 minutes. Or if it's somebody that you do things for, so you're actually supplying them services, I need this information in 10 minutes or we're going to have to go with somebody else, right? So think about, if you're sat at your desk, you get that. There's a big one around account suspension. If you don't send me this information, and we're going to lock your systems out. A big one for charities would be grant application. Hey, we're just going through this. We're in a room with 3 people. We're about to make a decision. I need this information from you immediately, so that we can give you money that you need. And I'm sure you need that money, right? So if it's asking you to click a link, to download attachment, to log into a different system, what would you be doing? What would you be thinking in that stage, right? And like I said, they put the pressure on you. They use some type of pressure, or they make you out to be their best friend, and they're saying, hey, you're in the know. You're the only person who can help with this. Nobody else knows about that. Generally speaking, I put on the slide there, immediate action required within 24 hours. It's normally going to be faster than that. They don't want to wait 24 hours, right? They want to wait an hour. They want to wait 15 minutes. They want that information immediately. What would you be thinking about? You should never be clicking links unless you know it's from a reputable source. You should never be downloading things unless you know it's from a reputable source. You want to verify the sender. You want to check the details. If in doubt, get somebody else to look at it. If you don't have an IT team, forward it to somebody who knows about IT. If you can't figure it out, ask somebody else, because if you click on it, it can cause massive issues. Okay, so we talked about phishing a little bit. Like I said, with AI, it can be very advanced, and it's not difficult, right? So AI is everywhere. People have access to it. Yes, the reputable AI companies, they have some security in place to try to stop some of this, but even that, there's ways around it, right? So building a phishing phone call using a voice that may sound familiar to you, maybe somebody, they've used a video of your CEO, they've taken the voice from that, they've rebuilt it, and they call you up and they say, they run through the scenario. They can do that to 1,000 people. They can do that to 10,000 people, right? So it's a very easy thing for them to do. These are the types of things that you will see in there. The IT support is a big one. The bank is a big one. They could be calling trustees, board members, trying to get information about your charity, what you're doing, how much money you've just received from a grant, right? So that they can think about why they're going to target you, how they're going to target you, how much money they can charge you if they get something in. You get the supplier verification scams. This is where they're either changing bank accounts, they're updating the details, or they're trying to get more information about you, trying to find out what bank accounts you pay things from. And then the grants authority, which is similar to the phishing that I talked about, right? We need you to talk, we're on the phone, we're in a board meeting, we're making these decisions now. We need you to give us this information before we can do that. And, the real world example, an animal welfare charity lost $3.5 grand when the caller impersonated their bank, convinced the treasurer to transfer funds to a secure account during a fake fraud investigation call. And I talked about that earlier with it. We see that a lot with individuals, right? Personal, generally older people, retired, moving their savings into a new account, right? And they were able to do it just because they, had a phone number and, they had a little bit of information about the organization. So these are the types of things in phishing that happen quite regularly. So what would you do in this situation? You get a call from someone who claims to be from your IT provider. They often sound super professional and confident, might even know a few things about your organization. They call up and they say, hey, I spoke to Bob. Bob told me to call you and we need this issue sorted out right now. We need it fixed. They're on the phone. They're waiting for you. This isn't an email. It's, there's even more pressure because you're speaking to that person. And you don't want to be rude, because what if it's true, right? You don't want to keep them on hold for a long time while you're going in and finding out. They go through the urgent demand. They insist that a serious threat requires your immediate action. You have to stop it. You are the only person who can help me. If you don't help me right now, there's going to be serious consequences. They ask you for a login detail. They say, hey, I need this username and password. We're going to send you an MFA code via your phone, and I need you to tell me what that is so that I can fix the problem. Nobody is ever going to call you for an MFA code. Those are for individuals themselves. Nobody should ever be calling you for that. No bank will ever call you for it. No organization will ever call it for it. It's your personal login details. So if somebody is doing that, that's a massive red flag. Here's the things to be considering, right? Never give out personal details. Never give out credentials. Never give out any of that stuff unless you know that person, unless you've verified outside of the phone call that that's happening. Really, you should never do it anyway. You should have policies in place where this just isn't a thing. But if there is a thing, you want to have a password, a word that you use, a scenario, something, right, where where you can verify that that is the person. And even that's not 100%, because if it's, hey, if somebody calls and asks you, if I call and ask you, I'm going to say, duck, duck, goose, or whatever it is, somebody will write that down. And if they write it down, if they put it in an email, it's accessible to threat actors. So really, you want to be thinking this never happens. But if it's something that, you think in the worst case scenario could happen, have something in place. Have a second check. They have to call you and then they have to call somebody else, or make sure you call them back on a different number. Get somebody else to call them back on a verified phone number that you know of. So ransomware is the biggest threat in our industry. It's absolutely huge. This is where threat actors make millions, and I mean, actually, it's $1 billion industry. There are companies just like our companies set up as threat groups, right? They are very good at it. They do it every day. They build the tools and the solutions to go through this. They do everything that you would do in your job. They work 8 to 12 hours a day. They have quotas, they have reviews, the whole thing, right? So you think, this is real world stuff, right? They're very, very good at it. And their job is to make money. So imagine in your environment, you have no access to anything because ransomware is set off. And the vast majority of the time when a company gets hit by a ransomware attack, the way they find out is because their computer stops working and a note comes up on it saying you've been hit by a ransomware attack. To get access to your information, pay this amount in Bitcoin to this Bitcoin address or some other kind of cryptocurrency. Actually, Bitcoin is not very common anymore. There's other more common cryptocurrency that's generally used. So what do you do in that situation, right? It's wow. Everybody, there's a big disruption or suspension of critical services because you have no access to any systems. If people find out, which they inevitably will, even in small organizations, people do find out. There can be significant reputational damage and loss of public trust. Even for a charity, if you think, oh, that charity's just been hit with ransomware, do I want them having my information? Do I want to give charity? Do I want to be, donating to them? If I'm a regular donator to that charity, or do they have my information? Financial loss from paying ransoms, which is never recommended. And it says there's probably 4 or 5 times on here where the slides say, do not pay the ransom. Unfortunately, there are times where that is the only solution, and my recommendation is don't pay it because you don't know, even if you pay it, whether you're going to get your data back. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. And if you've paid it, what's stopping them from coming back and doing it again? So you have to think very carefully about paying those things. The UK government's advice is don't pay. Or actually, I think there's, they say don't pay ransoms. In the US, if you pay a ransom, you have to do lots and lots and lots of reporting to say that you've paid it and why you paid it. And, they track all of that. Everything is there. And then obviously there's potential legal consequences. If you get hit with ransomware and you get investigated and they find out that you didn't have simple solutions set up in place to protect data, you can get fined. Yes, as a charity, especially if you're a small charity, it's going to be a lot of money for you. It may not be huge sums, but it may be enough to shut the charity down. So what we want to do is make sure that you continue to operate, to make sure that you're able to help the people that you're helping. Data breaches are simply data theft, right? And lots of times, these threat actors, they will do both. They will steal your data and they will put ransomware on as well. They can do either or. It's just as bad if they've stolen all your data. All of these things are still going to be a problem for you. If they steal your data and they send you an email and say, hey, we've got all your data. Do you want us to release it out to the public? And they will. They'll put them on websites where they'll put all of it out there, or they'll put a portion of it out there to show that they're serious, and they'll put the rest out if you don't pay the ransom. So they don't even have to put ransomware in your environment. They can just take your data, and that can come from lots of places. They don't even have to give access to your systems. If you have a cloud-based system and you think, okay, that's secure, It's protected by multi-factor authentication. Well, what happens when that one employee downloads your client database onto their computer because it's easier, their network isn't working very well, and that one computer gets hacked. Or what happens a lot is people email spreadsheets full of stuff, right? That's a data breach, right? It gets out into the wild, people have access to it. That can be problematic. And the big issue is going to be loss of trust. You can get ICO fines. There's lots of issues around that. And one of the examples in 2022, a UK mental health charity inadvertently exposed confidential client therapy notes through a misconfigured database, affecting hundreds of vulnerable individuals. I think lots of us probably heard about that in the news, right? Can you imagine? It wasn't even a hack. It was basically you just had to put an extra character into the web browser, or the person's name into the web browser at the end of the link, right? And you could see all of the stuff that person had been through. And it wasn't just that one isolated incident. I've seen that hundreds of times in my career, just because of a misconfiguration. So these are the types of things that you have to be thinking about for ransomware and data breaches. I know as small organizations, we think this won't happen, but it does. I can tell you it does. Yes, they're not going to come to you and say, you need to pay us £1 million to get your data back. But like I said, 5,000, 10,000, 20,000, and especially if they've been in your environment, lots of them will look at your books. These guys they're not stupid, right? They look at your accounts and they see how much money you have. So when they ask you for money, they know how much they have. One of the things that they used to do a lot is look at the insurance policies. So they knew how much the insurance companies would pay out. So they would just ask for that amount because they knew they had the money coming from insurance. This is the final scenario that we go through for ransomware infection. The initial infection, you get it through an email, a phishing email, you get it through bad attachments. If you have a big environment, you can get it through vulnerabilities in your firewall. Loads of vulnerabilities that they can do to get into your environment. And they set it off. And if you're lucky, you find out before they set it off, but the vast majority of the time, like I said earlier, when you find out is when you get the message on your screen. Once they're in your environment, they are spreading it around using the tools that are already in your environment. They don't have to install sophisticated third-party tools. They use remote desktop. They use power controls. They use, whatever it is that your IT department uses to spread software in your environment. They'll use that to spread the ransomware, and they're very quick, right? This stuff used to take, I think 72 hours was the average like 3 or 4 years ago. It's now down to like 8 hours to get into. Once they have initial access to your environment, within 8 hours, they've put it out there. And actually, I'm seeing reports of much quicker than that, 4 hours. So that's why preparedness is key. That's why resilience is key. That's why making sure you know what you're going to do in this situation is a key thing. Then you get the ransom demand. Sometimes they're, especially with small organizations, sometimes you don't get the ransom demand for 2 or 3 days because they're doing it to 50 organizations. So they're just waiting. They're just taking their time, going through, messaging each organization, saying, "Hey, we've hit the ransom." Yes, in most of the messages, it will tell you where to send money to get it back, but normally there is some level of communication with the threat actor before you actually send the money. And as we say, it's best not to. Some of the things that you should do in a ransomware, if you have a lot of systems, unplug them from the network. Take them off the network. Don't unplug the systems. Don't shut them down, because you can be getting rid of crucial evidence. And it can also in some situations cause additional damage. But unplug them from the network and then contact Action Fraud. Contact IT support, contact your cyber insurance, contact a reputable cybersecurity expert team to come in and help you in these situations, because we see it every day, and we know what to expect in these situations. We know how to get you back up and running as quickly as we can. And you also need to make notifications, and we'll go through some of the things that you need to be thinking about in these situations coming up on the next few slides. When I give you the handout, a lot of this stuff is in here, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on here, but you want to isolate the threat, you want to report the incident and get help, you want to communicate clearly. Transparency is definitely key. You also, and I'm not a lawyer, I'm not giving you legal advice, I'm not a communications expert, I'm not giving you that advice, but you have to be careful what you say, right? Because the moment you mention a breach, that is when the clock starts about reporting to some of these things, right? So, you're experiencing an incident, you're investigating something, but as soon as you know that data has been breached, that's when your clock starts on a lot of these systems for notifications. So, within communication, I would 100% recommend getting a lawyer. If you have cyber insurance, contacting your cyber insurance company. They have lawyers that they can bring in immediately. They have IR teams that they can bring in to help as well. Once your threat is contained, you recover your systems. The one thing I see a lot is people starting to recover the systems before the threat is contained. And I'm talking from all sizes of organizations, sometimes small, sometimes big. They start thinking, okay, well, that system has got ransomware on it, so we just re-put in a new system. Well, then that system gets hit with ransomware. I've seen stuff where I did a massive investigation a couple of years ago where it was global. Systems on every country you can think of were impacted. And they thought they had recovered it, but they had started too soon. And after doing recovery for 6 weeks, the ransomware group came back in and did it all again. So you have to be careful about that. And a big thing around all this is learning and adapting and updating. If you've been hit, you take it on the chin, you learn, you make sure that it doesn't happen again. And that's a big area that a lot of people fail to do. They put the same systems in place that they had before. They use the same software, the same security, and then the same thing happens all over again. So learning and adapting is a big aspect. I'm going to go through this real quick because phishing is the #1 thing that I see, and especially with small organizations. Make sure the sender is a real email address. If you click on the email and it says, Laurance, lots of times that's all it'll say. They'll change the heading so it just says Laurance, or it'll say, Laurance@Microsoft.com, and you click on it and it says, 5678 bob@gmail or Proton Mail or something. There's a mismatch in those. It's a fake email. Be very wary of urgent requests. Be wary of scare tactics. If something is that urgent, you have to take a second and think about it. We're all very quick to click. We're all very quick to be like, okay, I want to help this person, but just take a second, breathe, and go, okay, is this a real thing? Is this something I should be doing? And hover over the links before you click, right? You hover over it, it'll tell you what where the link is. In some systems it doesn't. You have to right click and it'll tell you, look at link, and it'll show you the link. Make sure that the link you're clicking is taking you to the website that it should be taking you to. And even in the link name, even in the website name, make sure it doesn't have a 0 for an O. Make sure it doesn't have an L for an I, right? Those types of things. I have put in here, watch out for poor grammar and spelling. That is still an indication, but it's a lot less. It used to be a very big trigger, very big red flag. You could tell they're using really bad grammar. But now they have AI. They can change that, no problem. And then, of course, when in doubt, don't do it. Don't click on it. Do further investigation. Yes, if something does turn out to be urgent, yeah, they might be a little bit annoyed, but actually most people now they know this stuff happens. And it'll be a learning experience for them. If they're sending emails, they're looking like it's phishing, they're gonna want to know, right? So that's a good lesson for them to learn. This is stuff outside of incident, right? Or outside of the technical aspect of the incident. As a charity, as an organization, you have legal and regulatory obligations, right? You have suggestions that may later turn into obligations. You have GDPR and ICO breach reporting. You have incident reporting requirements for the Charity Commission. You have contract obligations for funders and service users. That's an area that a lot of people don't think about. What's in our contract? What legal situations are we dealing with if we get breached and our board members' information gets taken, right? And there's also employment law consideration if staff data is compromised. That's a big one as well. Communication and public relations. My recommendation is you bring an expert in to do this kind of stuff, right? Obviously, there's money involved in these things, but you don't want to say the wrong things. We've had lots of incidents over the years where big company CEOs have come out and given misinformation at the beginning of a data breach and lost their jobs over it, lost their reputations over it, because you're speaking with the information that you're sending out to your donors, to your beneficiaries, partners, whatever. You need it to be accurate, and you need it to be worded so that they understand that it's accurate. Making transparent yet measured public statements is the best way. We have seen big companies get breached. The way that they communicate about the breach, the way that they shared information about the breach, the way they keep everybody updated, it didn't have a reputational damage against them. That was one of the things that they were applauded for. I've seen companies with big data breaches get applauded for how they handle it. So that's something to consider. Staff and operational welfare. This is a very stressful thing. Making sure that your staff are okay during these types of things is also something that we have to think about. I see it a lot with big organizations. You have CISOs, you have heads of IT security, you have the IT help desk, you have all these people. They're worrying that it was their fault, right? The one thing that they did made the vulnerability happen. So lots of them are worried about their jobs, and even outside of that, it may be more so in the smaller industry. People are thinking, oh God, if we've just been breached, I'm not going to have a job next week. Am I going to get paid? Can you make payments? Do you have payroll still active if you're going through a ransomware event, right? So these are the things that are overlooked a lot in incidents. And if you have this stuff prepared, you know what you're going to do in these situations, it makes it so much easier. Financial and business continuity. If something like this happens to you at the beginning of December, where people are doing matching donations, right, and you're signed up for that, what's going to be the impact on your charity? You're going to miss out on a lot of money if something like this happens. And threat actors know that. They know when to attack. They know when it's going to be worse for you. And then governance and accountability, making sure the right people are notified, making sure you thoroughly document all incident response actions taken. This is a big one. Make sure you're noting why you're doing the things that you're doing. This gets forgotten about a lot, because when you're stressed out and you're trying to fix what's happened, you're not thinking about those questions that are going to be asked to you in 2 months, in 6 months, in a year. But if you note it down, if you have a plan, if you have a note section, that's going to make this stuff so much easier for you. And then afterwards, making sure you're updating your policy, making sure you're ensuring your staff receives the necessary training for whatever news happened. And the bottom one is preparing for external audits and compliance checks. Yes, if you're a small charity, that may not happen for you, but it could, right? We see this a lot where people get breached once, they don't really have a lot of that. But if you get breached twice, yes, somebody's going to come in and check to make sure that they're protecting the personal information that's in your environment. We want to make sure that your mission doesn't stop during a cyber incident, right? That's the whole purpose of this. We want to make sure that you're able to continue doing and helping the people that depend on you to manage it, or to provide the services that you're providing. So this training, this learning is about managing the incident so that you can continue to do that. Some of the practical protection strategies: make sure you create strong passwords. I'm sure, most of you will have heard this. I hope all of you have strong passwords. I hope all of you use different passwords for every system, because one of the big things that happens a lot is if they get one of your passwords, they will go out and search for all your email addresses and all the different systems that you have access to. And they will use that password on all of them to see if they can get access to something. In a charity specifically, like I mentioned earlier, you have people that are helping, you have volunteers, they have access to your environment, they're using their own computers. If they get breached on their personal system and their password is the same password they use to get onto your online or your cloud or into your environment, even worse, the threat actors will find that out. They will use that to get into your environment and cause a data breach. I see it all the time. Third parties, volunteers, we need to make sure that they understand they're using their own passwords and not reusing them in other environments. I recommend using a password manager. I use one myself. Actually, I use a few of them. You can even use, Google has its own password manager. You can use that. But I like to use a third-party app like LastPass or Bitwarden or 1Password, something like that. So then all your passwords are in one place. I have it on all my devices so that I don't have to go and look on my computer to access an app on my phone. I make it as simple as possible. And yes, there are possibilities of vulnerabilities around those, but that's a rarity. So I definitely recommend you do it. I recommend you don't save all your passwords in an Excel document, even if you password protect it. I see that a lot, and it's better than an unprotected Excel document or an unprotected Word document, but it's not good security. You want to make sure you have something, an app that saves all those. The second biggest thing that I would recommend is enabling multi-factor authentication. I'm sure we're all familiar with that is. If you use a bank, you will know about multi-factor authentication. Having an authenticator app, it's very simple to set up. It just gives you that second level of security. You can have it set up so that it's, through text messaging. If you have systems, you can set that up so anybody who accesses your environment. Yes, it can be annoying sometimes. You have to go and you have to wait and you get a text and you say put the 4-digit or 6-digit code in, but it is worth it. That extra 30 seconds it takes to log into a website, even when you're in an emergency, is absolutely worth it. If you have single authentication, it's very easy to get into your environments because, like I said, you can get passwords from lots of different places. And if you have MFA is not 100%, there are ways, there's man-in-the-middle attacks, there's all sorts of things that people can do. But for the vast majority of the systems that we run, the vast majority of what we do, MFA is absolutely perfect. And then also make sure you keep your systems updated because vulnerabilities happen every day. I can't even tell you how many vulnerabilities Microsoft have had over the years, right? Just so many of them. And I don't recommend you go out and, as a charity, you don't have to have somebody des designated specifically to do this, to make sure that your systems are updated on the newest software and not vulnerable in any way. But big organizations, they have vulnerability managers now, right? That's their only job, to make sure that all their systems in place, have all their computers have been updated constantly to make sure there are no more vulnerabilities available. And a lot of this stuff that I'm talking about, a lot of these tools, a lot of these apps, you can get them for free as a charity, or cheap, very cheap, right? So it's worth looking into it. And again, it is simple to set up. If you don't have the skills to do it, call somebody like me. We'll come in and help you get it sorted out so that you make sure that your information is protected. Right. So the key takeaways in your next step, embrace simple security wins. Strong password, multi-factor authentication, keep your software up to date. That tackles the vast majority. Empower your team. Make sure you train the people that have access to your environment. Make sure they know what steps to take in all these situations. Make sure they know how to spot the phishing email. It's not going to be 100%. It's not, because you're going to have people that just won't be able to do it. But make sure that if you have people that aren't able to do it, they don't have access to your vital information, right? But at least train them so that they're thinking about it. Some of the phishing is very good. Some of it is like, I've almost clicked sometimes, right? So you have to be careful. You have to think about it. Does this make sense? And then get ready. Preparedness is the key. It really is. If you have a plan, if you've trained your people, if you've run through some scenarios, it doesn't have to take that long. You have people like me that are out here happily will do these trainings for free. Contact them. I'm not the only organization that does it. There are others out there. So get in contact. We'll help you train your people. Even if you think, oh, we're only a team of 5, have them trained. Document the fact that you've had training. Make sure that you're looking into this kind of stuff, because it can enable you to continue to do your mission. And that's what we're here for. I've repeated it several times. This isn't about making sure you're 100% mature in cybersecurity. I know what your missions are, right? That it's not cybersecurity. There has to be a balance. If you spent all your time on cyber training, you wouldn't be able to get anything else done. But these things can be quick. We can sort out IR plans. We can get you trained and make sure that you're ready for when something bad happens. And like I said, I'll be sending out some guidance. I'll be sending out an IR plan template for you to go through. I recommend that you engage somebody to help you with that. But even if you just get started, just have it there. Make sure it's offline, by the way. If you put it on your computer and it gets hit with ransomware, you're not going to be able to access it. So make sure you have the right people have a paper copy of it, or it's stored in a separate location so that you have access to it. Here's some cybersecurity resources for UK charities. There's government guidance and tools. The NCSC, really good. I recommend you go to their website. They have lots of information. I've taken a lot of the information from their website for this presentation. They have a small charity guide. The ICO offers a data protection toolkit. Like I mentioned, the Cyber Essential Scheme earlier, really good information in there. highly recommend you go to that and look at it. Action fraud, make sure you have the number written down somewhere. Make sure it's in your Rolodex, right? I mean, I know none of us have those anymore, but make sure you have it, because if you've been hit with a business email compromise, or you've been hit with ransomware and they're demanding money, they can help you with that. There are some specific charity resources, the Charity Digital Code of Practice, the NCBO digital resources, Charity Commission's guidance, TechSoup UK, Third Sector Labs. They can help you with some of the digital side of it, right? Make sure, I mean, obviously you guys, you're here, so you know who they are. Make sure you're looking at those resources. Training and support. I offer training and support. Charity Digital offers it. NCSC has training material. There's local digital skills programs, Third Sector Labs again, peer networks and forums, and stay up to date with what's going on. You know, you don't have to get the daily updates on cybersecurity, but you know, pay attention to the news. You start hearing about charities being hit, one or two, you need to heighten your awareness, because that's how threat actors work. They find a niche, they find a sector that's vulnerable, they intensify. You're always, you know, you're always a target. But if you hear about things happening, especially if you're using like Google Cloud and you're hearing about Google Cloud getting hit, you're using Microsoft 365, you're hearing about people using that a lot, that's when you have to start thinking, okay, we need to heighten up a little bit. We need to resend out this presentation to our employees. We need to go back through it again. We need to dust off the incident response plan and make sure it's up to date with the information that's required. Okay. Thank you very much. We're now open for questions or experiences people want to share.
Thank you so much for that, Laurance. That was really useful. I definitely learned a lot during that. I just noticed in the chat box that James popped a wee question in. What would you recommend as an alternative to password details on a document in a Microsoft Cloud, bearing in mind that multiple users might need access to those passwords?
Sorry, is it in here? So I can read it.
Yeah. So we currently use 1Password rather than having like a document. And we have a organization-wide one. So once you log in individually, you can see relevant passwords, and then you can also keep separate ones for yourself as well.
Yes, you can set it up for, like I use 1Password as well. So if you have a system that has one login, 1Password, you can share it via 1Password. So everybody will have 1Password. They will have the same password and document. I don't recommend that. I recommend you have different accounts, but I know that can be difficult in a small business or a small charity. So I would definitely not have a document that has all your passwords anywhere, ever. I would have 1Password. They have free versions of it. I would have one of the other password managers. It's going to depend on how you use it, which one's best, but having anything outside of a document with all your password is good, right?
I don't know if you can see that question from Jack in the chat there. What would you suggest is a good database software to use for a medium-sized charity? Not an IT
Well,
I'm responsible for technical.
I'm not a database expert. It would really depend on what you're using it for. But I think they're all good, and there's lots of good ones online that you can use for free. My recommendation is just to make sure that it's password protected and that the people that have access to it have multi-factor authentication set up so that it's not accessible easily by others, right? It really does depend on what you're using it for, which one I would recommend. But I mean, I use various ones, and as long as they're set up so that you have to have a username, password, and multi-factor, it's good.
Nice.
I'm gonna expand the chat box. Okay.
Yeah, have a look. There's lots coming in.
So, I mean, I can touch on 1Password a little bit, but it would be easier to do it one-to-one and help you set it up. But it's just a database, right? It's installed on your computer, on your phone. You can have it as an app in your web browser. So it will populate the username and password for you when you go to these sites. And again, that's the one you definitely want to have 1Password set up with MFA. And somebody mentioned secure password holders getting breached. That has happened. LastPass was breached before. It's a rarity that it happens, and I would take that risk over any other, unless you're just using your brain. And if you're able to store 1,000 passwords in your head, go for it. Like you're amazing. You're much better than I am, right? So, but writing it down or putting it in a Word document is so much less secure than having a password manager. If you think every day the people who built that password manager are working to make sure that it's secure. Yes, vulnerabilities happen. Yes, stuff happens, right? But it's a much greater risk having it on a cloud in a Word document than it is in the password manager. And they're really good. Like I have them on all my devices. I have them in the web browsers. I have multi-factor authentication, so every time I log in, it sends me a text message, or I have to give it a code from Google to make sure that it's me, right? But it's worth it. It's secure. Yeah, passkey is definitely recommended. I think that might be, well, actually, with a password manager, it's not that advanced, right? It's just me. It does additional algorithms to check to make sure that you're coming from the system that you have registered. Obviously, it can be on multiple systems, but it knows your computer. It does some calculations based on your hardware. So yes, passkey, and there's various different versions of passkey. Lots of different sites use passkey now. It's much more secure than password and MFA. So it's highly recommended. Another one, but it just depends on your organization, right? And most of us are used to username, password, getting a text message or coming up with a code. So I would start with that. But if you go to a website that offers passkey, definitely I would recommend it.
Any more questions? Feel free to unmute as well if you want to ask, or pop it in the chat box.
Okay, I'll ask a question. There's 29 people on here. Have any of you ever been in a cybersecurity incident at your workplace? Not where you are now. You don't have to disclose that information. But how many of you have been at a company that had a cyber incident? We have raised hands. Nobody? Okay, good. How many of you are the IT person for your charity?
Oh, we've got a
How
few.
many of you these are, you don't have to answer. I'm just throwing questions out there from my experience, right? How many of you have your IT set up by your cousin because he knew how to set up Hotmail 20 years ago? I was that guy, by the way. I'd done that for Charities before I got into cybersecurity because I knew about email and systems, right? It happens, right? So this is why preparedness is a massive thing, because our systems are set up by volunteers, by people. They may not even be experts. They may be experts in one area, right? I'm an expert in cybersecurity. People ask me to fix their printers all the time. I don't have a clue how to fix a printer, right? Like I'm like Googling it just like anybody else. There are areas that I don't know about. So you want specialist people if you can get them. There are, like I said, there are other companies out there like mine that help in these situations. So I highly recommend you reach out. Oh, we're getting the stories. Well, this is Jack, like what you said is, I think, the same for lots of charities, right? They have one person or two people, or they have three people, but you have 15 jobs, right? Your job is these 15 things. I think that's very common, especially in the charity sector, because we have to adapt. We can't afford to bring in consultants to do every aspect of everything. So we're learning on the fly. But the threat actors know that too, right? Like they know why, these things are available to them. So it's definitely worth contacting a company like mine just to have a conversation, just to talk through what your systems are. Very, very simple to do. CyberAid is the other one that I know of. They do a lot more on the GRC and so that's government risk and compliance and assessment work. I'm more focused on incident response, but you have to have both of those, right? And they can tell you if you have the right controls in place for your environment, right? So they're another one that's very useful to reach out to. I think their business is set up so that they engage consultancies on a pro bono basis for you, so they act in the middle. They do some of the stuff themselves, but a lot of theirs is they'll contact experts in each one of those areas to come out and help you. So they're another one worth speaking to.
If there's not any more questions or things to go over, then we'll.
Emma has asked the questions about cyber essentials. I'll
Oh,
just
nice.
quickly
Go
touch
for
on
it.
that.
Go for it.
It depends on the size of your business, right? And what I would recommend is reaching out to me, reaching out to CyberAid. We can help you based on what your systems are. So I can't tell you if it's difficult until I know what your environment looks like.
I've just popped the link to the slides and the instant response plan handout in the chat box, but I will also fire it into an email so that everybody has access to that as well, just for anyone who's already gone or maybe doesn't have time to look at it right this second. Thank you so much, Laurance. I feel like I've seen in the chat that everyone's really enjoyed this, but I also have really enjoyed this session. Definitely taken a lot away, and also great resources that you've shared as well. I'm definitely going to be having a look through and working out what I need to tighten up on as well. So thank you so much, and thank you to everyone for joining this call and asking your questions and engaging.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I've really enjoyed it.
Fab. And as well, everybody, please, Laurance is offering great advice and services, so definitely make the most of that resource that's that's there. Hope everyone has a nice rest of their day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.